Husic. First, though, the Shadow Finance Minister, Andrew Robb, joins me from Melbourne. Mr Robb, thank you very much for your time. The opposition's been critical of the way the government is funding this carbon pricing plan, but wouldn't the coalition have more credibility if you provided your own costings for how you would fund your direct action plan, $3.2 billion worth over the forward estimates?
Well, we've done that once already in a most comprehensive way, Kieran. We released a policy February last year, and the cost of that was the $3.2 billion in the first against the forward estimates. We then released $50 billion worth of savings to show how that we could quite easily manage within the budget the funding of our program. So we've got nothing to hide. It's all out there. It's been out there, in fact, for 15, 16 months. And it never got criticised in the run-down to the election. No one said that we weren't able to fund our direct action program. So the pressure's right back on the government. The fact of the matter is that, Wayne Swan dismissed the overrun in this package as broadly budget neutral. Well, it's just a total furphy. You're seeing a 4.3 which they've admitted to, and then there's $3 billion to retire 2,000 megawatts of brown coal generation capacity, which they're all saying contradictory things, but clearly it must come out of the budget. And then you've got the $10 billion slush fund, the Bob Brown Bank, which in other ways has been treated on the budget in this last budget, but this particular program, which is very similar to things that are within the budget, is now going to be funded from borrowing. So you really should say there's something close to $17 billion, but there's certainly $7 billion black hole without a doubt.
Okay, well, I want to ask you about that fund in a moment, that $10 billion Clean Energy Finance Corporation. But back to your costings, you said that they weren't criticised. They were criticised extensively. The Treasury and Finance found an $11 billion black hole in the costings. And then beyond that, Mr Robb, you've committed to providing your own tax cuts on top of this other commitment for the direct action. So you've made a number of other commitments. Surely there needs to be a revised set of costings, doesn't there?
Well, there will be. By the time we lead into the election, as we've made a commitment, there'll be a very clear set of costings and policy programs laid out for everyone to examine. What I'm saying to you is that
the opposition's calling for an election now. Should there not be the costings now?
Well, if there was an election now, the government would be required, through the commitments on both sides, the government would be required to lay down the state of the budget, and then we would be able to immediately respond with our own costings. But what I'm saying to you is it's just less than 12 months since we demonstrated that we did have a capacity. Even if you withdraw those items that were in contention between ourselves and Treasury, and bear in mind the difference on that was differences in assumptions in all of those programs. So we don't concede any of those programs to the Treasury, but even if you put those aside, we still had a surplus budget in the other savings that we'd identified. So we had clearly funded our commitment to a direct action program last year, which demonstrates our capacity to find savings and to fund programs that we're going to advance. We will do it again. We will do it again responsibly. Okay. We won't play the sorts of tricks that we are starting to see, the sleight of hand, the smoke and mirrors that's going on. They are covering up billions and billions and billions of dollars. They have lost control. The economics of this package are unravelling by the day, and they're just making it up as they're going along. Julia Gillard said yesterday that the money would come for the $3 billion to retire that 2,000 megawatts of generating power, that would come out of the contingency reserve. Well, the recent budget said there is no provision in the contingency reserve for anything to do with the climate change package. So it's funny money starting to enter into the government's funding of those programs.
The opposition leader has said that you would have your own tax cuts. Can I ask you specifically about this reform that a lot of economists have praised, and industry groups. This was the one out of the, based on the Henry Review recommendations, lifting the tax-free threshold to upwards of $20,000 from its current position of about $6,000. Do you welcome that? Removing about 1 million people out of the tax system, and would the coalition keep it or wind that back?
Well, we have said since the Henry Review was released that we were attracted to raising the tax-free threshold. But what we wouldn't do, Kieran, is increase the marginal tax rates as the government has in this package. This is not tax reform. On the one hand, they do something which has got some merit, but they pay for it by taking us back to the 1980s by being the first increase in marginal tax rates. The 15 goes to 19 and the 30 I think goes to 33 or 35. That is the first increase we've seen. That is a discouragement for people to work longer hours and make an extra quid to pay for the cost of their carbon tax, to pay off their family bills. That's a discouragement. So this government, on the one hand, does something which is sensible, but pays for it with something that is quite retrograde.
But how would you fund all of these promises? You're promising tax cuts, a tax-free threshold increase, which would go right up the scale according to what you're saying there, and that would cost billions and billions and billions of dollars. As well as that, the coalition is saying you would not purchase the least cost abatement from overseas when there is certified abatement done overseas. Greg Hunt says, no, we're not going to purchase that. How do you make all the numbers stack up?
Well, it's called living within your means, Kieran. This government has got no concept of that. We're seeing at the moment 8 million families around this country whose savings rate has gone from -1 to plus 11.5% over the last 12 months. These are people who, because they can't pay for the 12.5% increase in electricity prices even since Julia Gillard came to power, because they can't pay these utility bills and their mortgage rates and all the rest, they are cutting back on spending. They are not spending on things that they otherwise would do. They're deferring expenditure. They're going without. They're living within their means. This government, though, continues to ratchet up their rate of spending. They'll spend a lot more than they get even in this financial year. They're borrowing massively still, extra, $107 billion. That'll go up now another $10 billion with this slush fund that we're talking about. Therefore, we've got to, as a country, live within our means. That's first and foremost.
Why wouldn't you argue with your colleagues as Finance Minister then, let's look at purchasing abatement from overseas if there is least cost abatement overseas, rather than what looks like a cumbersome way of just spending all taxpayer money on funding the polluting industries?
Well, you think about it, Kieran.
Doesn't it make sense to say if there's least cost abatement overseas, why not use it?
Well, we don't need to use it. What we will do is encourage organisations, companies, to introduce changes to the way in which they're doing things to either store more carbon, such as in soil, or to reduce the amount of emissions, such as in the built environment, the city, the buildings, and in factories and others. Now, we will fund that. We've already established how we would fund it. This government's going to raise $24 billion across the period of the forward estimates in higher taxes from this carbon tax. Our whole program will cost $3.2 billion. When you take out the tax that's going to go back to lower income groups and for all the compensation, when you remove that, the actual cost, the cost of reducing the amount of emissions is relatively small against the total tax take of this government. If you take out of the government's total tax take all of the compensation and all the churn and the hundreds and hundreds and thousands of new bureaucrats, you will find that the cost of mitigation is probably about 10% of the total tax take. Now that's all we have to face is that 10% cost. We don't have to get all that other money.
What about the promise to increase? Just one last question. I know you've got a busy day ahead. I just want to ask you about the pension increase. There's going to be an increase to pensioners, self-funded retirees, a couple of $100 above their costs. They're going to get it 8 months before the tax comes into place. Would the coalition keep that magnitude of increase if you're elected at the next election, that you would implement that sort of pension rise?
Well, the first thing is, Kieran, that the best compensation is no tax, and we will rescind
So
this
you
tax,
wouldn't raise the pension by that magnitude?
No. What decisions we take in regards to the benefits that will accrue to different sections of the community, we will announce in advance. We have already said
no
that
guarantee
we will,
then? No guarantee to be of that magnitude?
What I do guarantee is that we will lay out well ahead of the election the tax cuts and other benefits that will accrue to other parts of the community. But we will first and foremost live within our means, not this government, which is putting Australia, in great jeopardy and vulnerability to any sort of downturn around the world by its profligate spending and this madness of a tax.
Shadow Finance Minister Andrew Robb, great to chat. Thanks a lot for that.
Thanks, Kieran.
Stay with us after the break on AM Agenda. I'll be joined by Josh Frydenberg and Ed Husick.